The morning sun had barely pierced the jagged peaks of eastern Afghanistan when the first explosion tore through the convoy. The ground shook violently beneath the tires of the Humvees, and a fireball erupted, engulfing one of the trucks in black smoke. Screams cut through the chaos as Marines were thrown from vehicles, some rolling down rocky embankments, others pinned beneath twisted metal. The acrid smell of burning fuel mingled with dust and sweat, creating a haze of panic and disorientation. Sergeant First Class Mason tried to radio headquarters, but only static answered. "Fall back, repeat, fall back," his voice trembled. Command was unreachable, leaving the 420 Marines stranded, trapped in a narrow valley with insurgents closing in from both sides. Mid the chaos, one figure moved with an eerie calm. Corporal Riley, Hawkeye, 26, adjusted her sniper rifle and scanned the ridges with piercing blue eyes. 2 years ago, she had joined the Corps, quiet and unassuming, blending into the background. But under that calm exterior hid a precision-focused mind and nerves of steel. Riley's reputation as a sniper had grown quietly, mostly whispers among officers and the few who had seen her in action. Today, her skill would be the difference between life and death. She ducked behind a shattered Humvee, surveying the valley. Flames licked the edges of overturned trucks and scattered Marines scrambled for cover, terrified. From the ridges above, insurgent snipers took calculated shots, their bullets spitting sparks off rocks. Riley's heart pounded, not with fear but with the responsibility weighing on her. Leaving these men now wasn't an option. Her radio crackled. A broken voice, almost drowned by static, whispered, "Hawkeye, we need eyes on the ridge, we need someone to—" Then silence. The message ended mid-word. No backup was coming. The brass had already declared the situation a lost cause. Riley exhaled slowly. Orders were clear. Fall back, regroup, abandon the valley. But looking at the young Marines, fresh out of boot camp, terrified, some barely able to stand, she knew she couldn't comply. Each face reflected the raw fear she felt herself, but also a glimmer of trust in someone who could guide them. She tightened her grip on her rifle. Every instinct screamed this was impossible, but her gut told her she had a shot, a literal one, to save them. She moved with practiced efficiency, sliding over rocks and debris, avoiding sniper fire with calculated precision. As she positioned herself on a ridge with the clearest vantage, Riley noticed something chilling. The insurgents were organized, coordinating from multiple ridges, cutting off every potential escape route. The valley wasn't just dangerous, it was a trap, and the Marines below were sitting ducks. Her jaw clenched. The wind whipped dust into her eyes, stinging, but she didn't flinch. She adjusted her scope, taking in the chaos below, her mind calculating trajectories, distances, and timing. She could pick off a few insurgents from this position, buy the Marines some breathing room, maybe even guide them to a safer exit. But it would mean acting alone, without orders. Her decision had to be immediate. She glanced back at the scattered troops, at the smoke and fire consuming the valley. Then, slowly, deliberately, she rose from cover. Every step toward the open ridge was a gamble with death. Her heart pounded, adrenaline flooding her veins, but her focus never wavered. She moved into the unknown, toward impossible odds, carrying the fate of 420 Marines on her shoulders. Somewhere in the chaos, a young private looked up, eyes wide, and whispered a question that echoed in Riley's mind. "Who's going to save us?" Riley didn't answer. She didn't have to. She knew the answer herself. Riley moved like a shadow across the ridge, each step measured, silent, deadly. Below her, the valley stretched like a bloodied theater, twisted Humvees, smoke rising in black pillars, and Marines scattered, some crawling, some frozen in shock. The insurgents were everywhere, firing from ridges and boulders, their tracer rounds cutting arcs of red across the morning sky. One misstep, one exposed moment, and Riley would be history. She lowered herself behind a boulder, surveying the battlefield through her scope. A young Marine, no older than 19, was pinned behind debris, shaking uncontrollably. His rifle jammed. Riley exhaled slowly, fingers tightening on her trigger. One precise shot, a split-second decision, and the insurgent taking aim at him was gone, collapsing silently into the dirt. The private blinked, terrified but alive. "Move," Riley shouted, just enough to carry to the few Marines nearby. They hesitated, but the urgency in her voice cut through their fear. She guided them, hand signals and whispered commands across the exposed terrain. Every second was a gamble. Bullets chipped rocks near their heads, sending sprays of stone into the air. The valley wasn't just a battlefield, it was a killing ground. Riley's eyes scanned constantly, noting enemy positions, their movements, the slight changes in shadow that betrayed sniper locations. She adjusted, fired, and moved again, a living ghost weaving through the chaos. Then she saw it, a flare white against the smoky haze rising from the far end of the valley. Another group of Marines trapped behind a ridge signaling for help. Her stomach twisted. They were too far, too exposed. If she didn't act fast, they would be cut down. Riley weighed her options. One path led through the open valley, a literal shooting gallery. Another ran along a jagged rock wall, slower but offering cover. She chose the riskier route, heart-pounding, because the Marines she had to save had no choice. They were pinned, screaming for help, their eyes wide with terror. Bullets whizzed past her ears as she sprinted across exposed terrain, diving behind boulders when tracer rounds passed dangerously close. Dust stung her eyes, sweat and blood mixed on her cheek, but she didn't stop. Her training kicked in: breath, aim, shoot, move. She killed one insurgent, another, each precise shot giving the Marines precious seconds to advance toward safety. Riley's mind was a whirlwind of calculations: distance, wind, the angle of shots, but her gut told her something the brass never would. She had a chance. Not a guarantee, but a chance, and she wouldn't let these Marines die. As she approached the trapped group, she signaled frantically, guiding them toward a narrow ravine she had spotted earlier. The natural funnel would limit the enemy's field of fire, giving the Marines a fighting chance. Some Marines hesitated, frozen in fear, but Riley's voice cut through the chaos. "Now, move, go." They obeyed. Slowly, methodically, they made their way toward cover, bullets kicking up dirt and rock all around them. Riley stayed behind, her body a human shield, taking precise shots at insurgents who dared to advance. Every heartbeat was agony. Every pull of the trigger was a prayer. Then came the scream. A young private, pinned by sniper fire, screaming as he tried to crawl to safety. Riley's eyes widened, and without thinking, she darted across open ground, laying down cover fire with surgical precision. She grabbed the Marine, dragged him into cover, and fired another round at a sniper attempting to flank them. Riley pressed forward, the weight of her rifle a familiar anchor amid chaos. The valley below was a tableau of destruction. Marines pinned behind rocks, vehicles smoldering, smoke curling into the sky like black tendrils of doom. Tracer rounds crisscrossed the terrain, bullets kicking up dirt and rock as insurgents advanced with deadly precision. Every step Riley took was measured, every movement deliberate. She could feel the difference between life and death with each heartbeat. From her vantage point, the ravine she had spotted earlier was her best chance. It narrowed the enemy's field of fire, creating a natural funnel. If the Marines could reach it, they could regroup, reorganize, and maybe, just maybe, survive. But the path was littered with hazards: exposed ground, hidden snipers, and insurgents armed with RPGs and machine guns. Riley exhaled slowly, her mind calculating trajectories, distances, wind, and the angles of every ridge. Her pulse pounded, but she refused to let fear dictate her actions. She fired, took cover, moved again, methodical, surgical. One insurgent went down, then another, and with each kill the Marines below inched forward, gaining precious seconds. She spotted a cluster of young Marines frozen behind debris. Their faces were pale, eyes wide with terror. Riley's voice cut through the din of gunfire. "Move now, on my mark!" Some obeyed immediately, others hesitated, but she had no time to argue. She darted across the open ground, bullets whizzing past her ears, and laid down suppressive fire. A hail of rocks and sand sprayed into the air as shots tore through the terrain around her. Riley grabbed one of the hesitant Marines by the arm, dragging him to cover, and fired another precise round at an insurgent attempting to flank them. She was bleeding from a shallow wound on her arm, her uniform torn, sweat and dust caking her face. Pain didn't matter. There was no time for it. Every second counted, every Marine's survival depended on her. The insurgents were adapting, coordinating, and closing in faster than Riley had anticipated. They were experienced, professional, and ruthless. Yet Riley's calm precision kept them at bay. Her rifle sang a deadly lullaby across the valley, each shot disrupting enemy movements, forcing them to reconsider their advance. Then she saw a flare in the distance, another group of Marines trapped on the far side of the valley. They were signaling for extraction, but the distance was nearly 1,000 meters, and the open ground between them and safety was a killing field. Riley's stomach twisted. The insurgents had already taken positions along that path, and any misstep could get those Marines slaughtered. Riley made a split-second decision. She had no support, no orders, no assurance of backup. But she had skill, determination, and a refusal to leave any Marine behind. She began moving toward the trapped group, taking cover where she could, firing at insurgents to create a path. Her shots were precise, deadly, and intentional, each one buying crucial time. She reached a point where the Marines could see her, and she signaled frantically for them to move toward the ravine. A young private, paralyzed with fear, looked at her and whispered, We're going to die." Riley met his eyes, voice steady despite the chaos. "Not if I can help it. Move now." They obeyed, crawling and running as bullets whipped past them. Riley stayed behind, the human shield against the enemy's gaze. She felt a sting in her arm, another bullet had grazed her. But she ignored it, focusing solely on the Marines moving toward relative safety. Riley's heart raced as she froze behind the jagged ridge. The sniper on the opposite ridge was a professional, calm, patient, and deadly. One miscalculation, one twitch, and Riley would be cut down instantly. The valley stretched between them like a war-torn canyon, smoke curling from destroyed Humvees and tracer fire streaking across the dirt below. The Marines she had guided to the ravine were taking cover, but the enemy was regrouping, preparing for a final, coordinated assault. Her mind raced. Every instinct screamed, retreat, fall back, live to fight another day. But retreat would mean abandoning 420 Marines, leaving them to die in the valley below. Her teeth clenched. That wasn't an option, not for her. Riley scanned the terrain through her scope, measuring distances, calculating wind, and visualizing angles. The enemy sniper was at least 900 meters away, a near-impossible shot with so many variables. Her breath steadied, hands tightening around the rifle. One shot, one chance. She had to disrupt the enemy, buy more time for the Marines. She exhaled slowly, adjusted her position, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle barked, echoing across the valley. The enemy sniper's head snapped up, then collapsed as chaos erupted among their forces. But Riley didn't pause. She fired again, this time taking down a machine gun nest targeting the ravine. Sparks flew, rocks shattered, and insurgents scrambled for cover. Below, the Marines she had guided began moving again, taking advantage of the confusion. Some crawled, some ran, but all were alive. Riley's presence had become a lifeline, a silent guardian guiding them through hell. But the danger was far from over. Insurgents adapted quickly, flanking from ridges she hadn't anticipated. A barrage of bullets zipped past her position, striking rocks and kicking up clouds of dust. Riley felt a sting in her shoulder, another graze, but she ignored it. Focus was all that mattered now. Every shot was calculated, every movement deliberate. Riley's eyes locked on a small cluster of Marines pinned near a collapsed Humvee. A young corporal had fallen, screaming in terror, and insurgents were closing in. Riley darted from cover to cover, her rifle discharging with precision, clearing a path. She reached the corporal, dragging him behind a boulder as another round ripped through the air above them. The sniper on the opposite ridge had disappeared, likely repositioning, but Riley knew the threat wasn't gone. She couldn't stay in one place for long. Her training and instincts took over. Fire, move, cover, repeat. She led the Marines toward a safer section of the ravine, bullets kicking up dust and rock with each careful step. Then she saw it, a young private frozen, separated from the group, eyes wide with terror. Insurgents were closing in, their rifles trained like iron sights on him. Riley didn't hesitate. She sprinted across open ground, bullets slamming into the earth around her, and dragged the private into cover. Her chest heaved, sweat mixing with blood, but she didn't pause. Her focus was razor-sharp. Every second she bought them meant a chance at survival. She took a deep breath, scanning the valley once more. The Marines were moving steadily toward the ravine, but the enemy had regrouped, closing in from multiple ridges. Riley realized with a chilling clarity. She had bought time, yes, but the battle was far from over. Every Marine below depended on her now, and the enemy sniper had only been the beginning. Riley froze behind the ridge, heart pounding, as the massive insurgent machine gun emplacement came into full view. It was a steel monstrosity, manned by 3 heavily armed fighters, each scanning the ravine with deadly intent. The Marines she had guided were huddled at the base, pinned by incoming fire, some screaming, some paralyzed with fear. Riley felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle like stone in her chest. She had no backup, no orders, no reinforcements. Every instinct screamed retreat, but retreat meant certain death for the Marines. She tightened her jaw and whispered under her breath, "Not today." Riley adjusted her rifle, checking the wind, distance, and trajectory. The first shot had to disable the gun nest before it could unleash a torrent of rounds on the ravine below. Her hands were steady despite the chaos, her breaths measured, her pulse syncing with the rhythm of survival. Then a sudden crack split the air. A bullet ripped through the scope of her rifle, shattering glass and sending sparks into her face. Pain shot up her arm, but she ignored it, swallowing the sting. She had one chance, one breath, one shot. Riley fired. The first insurgent fell, screaming as the round tore through the emplacement. The second scrambled for cover, but Riley's follow-up shot hit him before he could aim properly. The third opened fire, but she anticipated his movement, adjusted, and fired again. Chaos erupted among the enemy ranks, bullets ricocheting off rocks and dirt. Below, the Marines scrambled, seizing the opening Riley had created. They ran toward the ravine, dragging the wounded and covering each other as they moved. Some of them glanced up, eyes wide, as if expecting the sniper to vanish at any second, but Riley didn't retreat. She held her ground, every movement calculated, every shot precise. The enemy regrouped, flanking from another ridge, and suddenly Riley was under fire from two directions. Tracer rounds zipped past her, kicking up dirt and rock with terrifying proximity. She rolled behind a boulder, groaning from the pain in her arm, and fired through a narrow gap. Each round she discharged was a lifeline for the Marines below. Then came a cry, a young private pinned behind debris, screaming as bullets tore the earth around him. Riley's stomach twisted, adrenaline surging through her veins. Without hesitation, she sprinted across open ground, bullets whizzing dangerously close, and grabbed him, dragging him behind cover. She fired another shot at a sniper attempting to flank from the left, feeling the recoil jolt through her injured shoulder. Riley's mind raced. She realized the insurgents had adapted. They were coordinating now, cutting off the Marines' path to the ravine. Every second she held them at bay was a second closer to death. Sweat and blood caked her face, her uniform torn, her body shaking from exhaustion, but she refused to falter. She took a deep breath, scanned the valley, and saw movement she hadn't anticipated. Another enemy sniper, hidden behind a shattered Humvee at the edge of the valley, lining up a shot at the Marines she had guided. Her stomach dropped. She had been exposed, vulnerable, and the sniper had a perfect line of fire. Riley's mind went to work, calculating, predicting, improvising. She fired, rolling to the side, and watched as the sniper fell back into the dirt, suppressed by her relentless assault. But even as she breathed a momentary sigh of relief, she knew the valley was far from safe. The enemy had more reinforcements, and time was slipping away. Riley pressed herself flat against the ridge, breathing hard, blood and dust caking her uniform. The Marines she had guided were now huddled in the narrow ravine, temporarily safe. But the enemy was regrouping, flanking from every angle. Every second that ticked by was another second closer to being overrun. Her training screamed, orders first, protocol first. But there was no time. Her superiors had abandoned the valley, command channels were dead or jammed, and the Marines, 420 lives, were in immediate peril. Riley knew that waiting for clearance would mean death for all of them. She pulled out her damaged radio, sparks flying from its cracked casing. Every beep and static-filled buzz reminded her how far outside protocol she was going, but she had no choice. She keyed the mic, bypassing all channels, codes, and authority. "This is Hawkeye, 420 Marines left for dead, need immediate extraction, coordinates now." The words felt heavy in her mouth. They were reckless, unauthorized, potentially career-ending, but they were also the only lifeline for the Marines who had survived because of her. Below, the Marines were moving cautiously through the ravine, following her hand signals, crawling over rocks, dragging the wounded. Riley fired over their heads, suppressing insurgents who dared to peek from cover. Each shot bought them precious seconds. Her arm throbbed from a graze, her lungs burned from exertion, but her focus was unwavering. A young corporal froze mid-crawl, terror etched across his face. Riley shouted, voice raw, "Keep moving, don't stop." He obeyed, crawling after his comrades as bullets ricocheted around them. Riley's eyes darted across the valley, calculating every enemy movement, every ridge, every boulder that could be used for cover. The insurgents were adapting again, regrouping on the far ridges, coordinating with deadly precision. RPGs streaked through the sky, one landing dangerously close to the ravine. The ground shook, debris flying in every direction. Marines screamed. Riley's pulse spiked, but she forced herself to remain calm. She darted across open ground, exposing herself to suppress a group of insurgents who were advancing too quickly. Her rifle barked with deadly precision, taking out two fighters, buying the Marines time to move. She grabbed a private who had stumbled, dragging him behind cover as tracer rounds zipped past. Her uniform was torn, her arm bleeding, her face smeared with grime, but she couldn't stop. Not now. Riley glanced at the sky, squinting through the smoke. In the distance, helicopters were approaching, too far to intervene immediately but responding to her unauthorized call. Every second they took to reach the ravine was a second the Marines couldn't afford. Her mind raced. She knew the extraction would be dangerous. Enemy snipers could target the helicopters, insurgents could flank, and any misstep would spell disaster. But she also knew that she had done everything she could on the ground. It was now a waiting game, but she had bought her Marines the only chance they had. Then came the scream. A young private separated from the group was pinned by enemy fire, unable to move. Riley didn't hesitate. She ran across open ground, bullets tearing into the dirt around her, and dragged him into cover. She fired one last round at an insurgent aiming for the ravine, her blue eyes icy and unyielding. The roar of helicopter blades shattered the valley's chaos, cutting through the smoke and gunfire like a promise of salvation. Riley squinted against the rising sun, reflecting off the rotors, adrenaline surging through her veins. The extraction had finally arrived, but the valley below was still a death trap. The insurgents hadn't relented. They were regrouping, their rifles and RPGs trained on the Marines clustered in the ravine. Every second counted. Riley stayed low, scanning the terrain. She could see the Marines scrambling toward the drop zones, dragging the wounded, some stumbling, others frozen with fear. She fired over their heads, suppressing insurgents trying to pin them down. Her arms were shaking from exhaustion, her uniform shredded, blood caked across her cheek, but she remained a living barrier between the enemy and her Marines. The first rope dropped from the hovering helicopter. Marines rushed forward, some grabbing the rope, others helping the wounded climb. Riley's eyes darted around, calculating every shot, every movement. The insurgents had positioned a machine gun on the far ridge, aiming directly at the ravine. One sweep of their barrel could decimate the extraction. Riley didn't hesitate. She fired with precise bursts, forcing the enemy gunners to duck behind cover. The suppression worked, but only temporarily. More insurgents began advancing, flanking the Marines from the other side. Her pulse thundered in her ears, but she stayed focused. She had done this countless times in training, but nothing compared to the stakes now. Real lives, real chaos, real death. A young private tripped on loose rocks, screaming as enemy fire tore into the valley. Riley sprinted toward him, ignoring the open ground, bullets whizzing past, dust and gravel exploding at her feet. She grabbed him, yanking him to cover, then fired another precise shot at a sniper attempting to flank from the left ridge. The private's wide eyes locked on hers, and Riley whispered, "Not today. Move." The Marines continued boarding the helicopters, wounded or not. Riley provided cover, moving from rock to rock, picking off insurgents who threatened to cut off their escape. Her lungs burned, her arm throbbed, her vision blurred from sweat and blood, but she couldn't stop. She couldn't falter, not with 420 lives hanging in the balance. The second helicopter arrived, rotors whipping sand and debris into the air. Marines scrambled toward the ropes, and Riley realized there was one private still separated from the group, frozen in terror. Without thinking, she dashed across open terrain, bullets tearing the dirt around her. She grabbed him, dragging him toward the helicopter, firing over her shoulder to keep enemy forces at bay. As she reached the rope, she hoisted the private onto it, then climbed herself, muscles screaming in protest. Behind her, the valley burned with chaos, the insurgents regrouping, rockets streaking past, smoke and fire twisting into the sky. Yet, for the first time in hours, Riley felt a fraction of relief. The Marines she had saved were alive, thanks to her unrelenting precision and courage. She collapsed into the helicopter, gasping for air, blood streaked across her face. Medics rushed to the wounded, but she waved them off. Her eyes were still locked on the valley below, watching for any threats. The extraction was, but Riley knew better than to assume the fight was over. Outside the helicopter, the valley stretched, smoke curling from destroyed vehicles, bodies moving toward safety, and insurgents disappearing into the rocky terrain. Riley's mind was already processing the next steps: reorganization, defense, the impossible task of ensuring everyone survived. Back on base, the adrenaline had finally begun to fade, replaced by a hollow weight in Riley's chest. She sat silently on the edge of the medic's cot. Her uniform torn, blood and grime streaked across her face, her arm bandaged but still throbbing with pain. Around her, the sounds of the battalion settling, the low hum of helicopters, and the distant murmur of command filled the room. But Riley barely heard any of it. Her mind replayed the valley, the fire, the smoke, the screams, and the faces of Marines she had guided to safety. Command was in chaos. Officers debriefed survivors, tallying casualties and coordinating reports. But amidst the paperwork and protocol, one truth emerged. 420 Marines were alive because of her. One corporal, a sniper who had broken every rule in the book, had taken impossible risks and refused to leave a single Marine behind. Her commander approached, the weight of authority behind him, eyes narrowed in a mix of disbelief and admiration. "Corporal," he began, voice measured, "you broke protocol. You acted outside every order we gave." But he hesitated, then sighed. "You saved lives, hundreds of them. We'll need to document this. This will go down in the battalion's history." Riley nodded quietly. Praise wasn't her goal. Recognition wasn't her aim. She had acted out of instinct, out of duty, and out of a promise she had whispered to herself years ago: never leave a Marine behind. She didn't need medals. She didn't need approval. All she needed was the knowledge that they had survived. Survivors slowly trickled back into the base. Some limped, some were bandaged, and some silently thanked her with tears in their eyes. A young private, no older than Riley's little brother, approached her, shaking. "Corporal, you saved us. I don't even know how to say thanks." Riley looked him in the eyes, exhausted but steady. "Stay alive," she said simply. "That's all the thanks I need." News of her actions spread like wildfire through the Corps. Whispers became rumors, and rumors became legend. "Hawkeye," they called her, the sniper who had orders, crossed open fire zones alone, and saved 420 Marines from certain death. In the quiet of the base, she became more than a corporal. She became a symbol of courage and unflinching resolve. Yet even in the glow of that recognition, Riley couldn't shake the images of the valley, the bodies she had left behind, the insurgents she hadn't eliminated, the constant hum of danger that still lingered in the mountains. Her work was never truly done. The battle was over, but the war remained. Somewhere out there, insurgent leaders were plotting revenge, and they would remember her name. Riley cleaned her rifle that night, methodical, precise, almost ritualistic. Every scratch, every smudge, every mark told a story of survival, of chaos, of unyielding will. She whispered to herself, as she often did before a mission, never leave a Marine behind. It wasn't a mantra. It was a promise. A rule she lived by even when every regulation, every chain of command, and every expectation screamed otherwise. Somewhere beyond the base, the mountains loomed, silent witnesses to the battle that had just ended. And Riley knew they were watching her still. The insurgents, smart and vengeful, would not forget. Neither would she.